Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few friends get together and combine their ideas into a Frankenstein-like monster, one that is more pretty than the Frankenstein monster, but just as resilient and strong. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. What story elements did you guys have?
I have anti-hero.
I have unique vehicle.
And I have, what was it again? Prophecy. Who should go first? Should I go first?
I think so.
Okay, so I've been reading in Isaiah about the prophecies of the Messiah, but I've been also thinking about Wheel of Time and the prophecies of the dragon. And I don't think that my prophecy is going to be like either of those two. Basically,
Good.
yeah, I know, right? Basically, what happened is a long time ago, there were people and they gathered together to form civilization, and they had struggled through conflict and, famine in order to create at least a foothold of like civilization, right? Where rational thought was expressed and discussed, where people were allowed to be individuals, but could also be part of a community, where health was considered and real strides were being made in sort of science and technology. Think like Greek level, like Greek level of, like the Greek philosophers, that level of technology, but they were like on their way.
So we're talking like a cliff full of mirrors to burn enemy ships kind of technology?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yes. And more. And different, crazier things. But what happened is they sort of could tell that something was coming. Some kind of catastrophe was coming, and they weren't quite sure what it was, but it was things based on the sun and moon and planetary positions, something about how the plants were growing every year, and they couldn't really pinpoint the time or the day. They knew that it was in the future, but they weren't quite sure when it was going to happen. So then what they decided to do was to basically reorient their entire civilization to the manufacturing of guide stones, right? Now, you've heard about these things in Georgia that were just blown up and destroyed. Apparently some weirdo or somebody in the past created, in his mind, it was like a Stonehenge type of thing, like a clock and a compass and a calendar, and it apparently had everything written on it needed for the recreation of civilization. Turns out it wasn't exactly that, but this is that same sort of thing. Basically, all of society turned into, and for like 20 years, they invested technology and created 6 huge slabs of some unknown material, right? That was completely impervious to any weather, right? It was impervious to wind and rain. It had a stone, but almost metal-like feeling to it. And on it, they inscribed basically the path towards society, the path towards how to get to where they were in case something were to happen and people were to fall away from their incredibly prosperous and successful society. So it was set up as, you do this, and then you do this, and you do that, and you do that, and you act like this, and you treat people like this, and that's how it was set up, in the hopes that someone would start at the beginning and make their way across. You start at 1 and you read all 6, and by the time you get to the end, you basically have all the tools needed to start again. The problem is that because they sort of reoriented their society towards making these things, it was kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Self-fulfilling prophecy is that the countries around them, which had previously been terrified of kind of encroaching on their land because these people were unified and could meet any threat with capabilities that were so far beyond what anyone else had, they noticed that the walls and the watchtowers and the mirrors weren't as defended as they used to be. And they basically encroached. And by the time this civilization noticed that all of their enemies were encroaching on them, they tried to fight back, but their main resources were depleted, and their entire system just kind of crumbled as all their enemies, and they rushed to finish these as they realized that this maybe was the thing. The last guide stone was not put in place, however, which basically detailed who they were and what this was. That it was lost, half finished and lost. So now here, thousands of years later, these guidestones sit in this square of a country not in any way related to this original civilization, but it's impossible to move them. And people view it as a prophecy because as you read it and what they've been able to understand, as you read it, what they feel like it says is he will come and he will do this thing and he will do that thing and he will unite people in this way and he will, perform good trade. And it, like, basically, if you remove all of the, this is how you do this, and they've just translated it wrong, and people are constantly trying to find the person who is going to fulfill this because obviously some civilization left this behind, foretelling about some hero that was going to come and fix all of society. That's the prophecy.
Okay, so if I will continue on with my unique vehicle, and I'll kind of explain it, and then if with Levi's permission, if you want part of this to be part of the guide stones, so I think it might fit fairly well.
Yeah, let's hear
and
it.
if we want it to be something completely different. Okay, so the unique vehicle or transport thing would be it'd be like what was that in that one game we used to play? That it's in a lot of different things where it's like the mana portal that brings you from one place to another. You kind of had to find each different one to like connect to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was originally thinking that there'd be like 7 of these, 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did you
type
a portal?
Right, but kind of basically it'd be like I don't know if the particle accelerator would be the right thing, but from a more mystical idea, it basically would break you down into the quantum level and reanimate you at the other location.
Okay. Yeah.
However, in ancient times, this was, a magic portal.
Right.
And it would have been like a Stonehenge type structure, but it would have worked together with an amulet, which is basically the remote of where you'd want to go. So if you wanted to go from, point A to point E, you'd have to, adjust, this amulet, it'd be like a round amulet with,
Right.
7 diamonds on there, 7 different jewels. And then you would, slide in like to the center or whatever the coordinates. You wanted to go from ruby to emerald, or you wanted to,
right.
go from...
It's like the recipe. It lets the
Right.
portal know where you want to go.
Right. So,
Yeah.
and then basically that would then bringing that inside of, this Stonehenge thing would activate, the portal and send the traveler on the way, but they'd have to be wearing the amulet as well. If you didn't have the amulet, it wouldn't take you.
Yeah.
So basically what I'm saying is these structures would be a lot similar to like a structure set up like these guide stones or Stonehenge things.
Yeah.
Do we want to tie them in as the same thing? Because I have another idea for it too, kind of with how you had this set up.
Well, I kind of had this, as you were talking, I was kind of thinking that, this was thousands of years ago, and now these are kind of like arches, and now they're like at like really important political buildings will have this kind of really ornate arch in front of it, from like a long time ago, or like a city, which still has like a bunch of old architecture will have like a big arch that you can drive or walk through, and it's like these things are left over from thousands of years ago. I don't know what you mean. Is that what you mean from the same time or place?
Okay, so I'll put forward a different idea here, or a different concept that I had come across. The concept is that there's like theorizing that some of the old stories of, Hercules and Zeus and Mercury and, Jupiter and
Right.
Neptune and all like the old gods, and the, let's say, holy documents describing some of that, told stories as we would understand them to be, but they held, let's say, the secrets to alchemy. And so if you read them correctly, it would let you tap into, let's say, scientific discoveries that have been lost to time.
Yeah.
Because they've been
Is this a thing that people really believe?
It's an idea, yeah.
That's really cool. I've never
So,
heard of
I mean, the one that pops into mind, there was like some story about catching Mercury with a certain net. It was like Neptune's net. Well, you look at Neptune. What is the periodic table for Neptune? Well, the element that like NU or it was something like that. So it's like, how would you collect Mercury? Well, you have to use Neptune's net. Well, Neptune's net of 3 electrons and 4 protons, would catch the element of Mercury and turn it or stabilize it in with these other nutrients. It's some chemistry stuff that,
Interesting.
back from our
That's kind of interesting.
school days, but that's the idea of it. And so you just read it and you'd read this, grand story, how, let's say like, Loki is running running amok and they have to catch him or stop him. So they turn Thor into a goat, and and it's like, okay, so it's a story. They go see the dwarf who makes them an amulet that of gold and sapphire that turns Thor, the god of lightning and thunder, into a goat. And so some of it's like a cryptic breakdown. And so like the idea with kind of setting up, that's what made me think of it with the Greeks and some of that other technology. So I was thinking, oh, okay, well, this is an idea. So like you have, let's say, this ancient religion that comes down, and let's say all these people believe it, and some of these, let's say, quote unquote old gods, and it's a dying thing, these ancient texts, but it's like, oh, this is what we live our lives by, kind of the ancient words of the great beings of old, and kind of connected maybe with these guide stones. And you could look at it one way, and you could read into the these stories that have been passed down in these ancient texts that you could be like, oh, see, this is the Messiah prophecy thing of this character returning, and he's gonna stop the the war god that is gonna manifest in this way. And not that some of that might not be true from a prophetic sense, but other people have taken some of that and gone, let's say, maybe this other route, and found scientific anomalies that when applied gives them access to kind of otherworldly technology. And maybe that's what this is this
even just like how in like Stargate, Thor is not like the blonde-haired, hammer wielding god. He's like an alien.
Yeah, like a little skinny little Area 51 guy that has been, made skinny by living in less than full gravity for his entire life.
Yeah, but they still attribute these kind of mythical ideas to him, because he has chosen to represent himself in that way.
Well, we've got an anti-hero here, and Claude is the gardener, and he sees to the palace grounds, and the ruler has kind of set up a way of seeing to keeping his own power, and part of the palace grounds include this the slabs, the guide stones, and the big arch thing. Yeah. And Claude is the gardener. And the different bureaucrat types and government ministers and whatnot often will, seek the solace of the garden. And Claude is a big, large, well-muscled guy, and he's methodical and economical in his movements, but he's surprisingly quick and agile when it's called for. But that's not something you would look at him and think about. And he doesn't say much, but he sees and hears everything. And he's a keeper of confidences. And so he's readily confided in. And these ministers that are struggling to kind of keep everything together and still, satisfy the vanities of the ruler, they'll discuss with him, what they think. And they'll often ask him what he thinks, what he makes of the guide stones. And of course, he always turns any question that around to get them talking about what they think, because that's really what they're interested in anyway. Like I said, he rarely says much, but he sees and hears everything. And when his moment arrives, he's ready to step in to do what must be done. He's always studied, and he's taught himself everything that he can find out about these guide stones. But he goes out and he moves dirt around, and he prunes the shrubbery, and he sees to things and kind of keeps things in order. But I think of you talk about prophecy. I think we're in a time now, thousands of years later, where society has functioned, and goods and services are provided, and people are remunerated for their efforts in some way or other. I mean, the system works, but it's kind of sliding into, we're not exactly in a period where great advances are taking place and where great learning is expanding, and the ruler likes to throw big parties, and because of the centralization of power, he has resources to do that. And like I say, Claude is he's ready to step in to do what must be done when his moment arrives.
Great. How is he the anti-hero?
Well, he wouldn't see himself as vying for power. He would see himself as being a gardener and just wanting to just, go do what must be done to keep things in order. But if everyone around him is letting things go, he'll say, well, like I said, ready to step in, reluctantly. He's not at all interested in, building a kingdom for himself. He just doesn't want the idiots to wreck everything.
Right. So there's a couple things we need to rectify in this story right now, as I can tell. We need to rectify what has happened to society that they didn't just start listening, following the Guidestones and take back society, right? There's some reason, some higher appeal, or some knowledge, some key knowledge that's been lost in order to make it so they couldn't, It could be even as simple as we've only just unearthed the Guidestones 50 years ago,
Yeah.
and we haven't had a chance to, or they've only been recently translated, or we have translated them all wrong. And now the Guidestone that wasn't finished has been finished, and it has provided enough cross information for us to finally translate them correctly. You know what I mean? I'm trying to figure out exactly what it would be that would be the great need.
Perhaps
Besides
something like this. All of them are written in a different tongue or language. So if there's, let's say, 5 that are set up or that they found, if the 6th one wasn't set up, perhaps that held the key, let's say almost like a star. If the 5 of them are set up and let's say through some kind of archaeological thing, they find that there was a site where there was these other stones and it just so happened, let's say, correlates with these other ones. If they put them together, it would make the same arch, and it makes a central location, and it has the key to decipher, almost like the Rosetta Stone, where for ages and ages they didn't have, they didn't know what hieroglyphs said, but until they found, let's say, the Rosetta Stone that had, the hieroglyphs with Greek underneath of them, or Sumerian, or whatever it was. One other one that they did figure out, it opened a whole new, at least synopsis of what hieroglyphs could say, if we really even know what they do. And perhaps that's what they were missing. What's on all these other stones are all, let's say, dialects of something that were, say, lost. Maybe they found other things, but no direct indication as to what they mean. People have synopsized, either by pictographs or, let's say, slight references and other things, but have never cracked it. Another thing would be, so the idea of, take some of these other ancient languages, Hebrew, where the vowel, phonetics of it are not always indicated. So if you found different Hebrew writing and didn't know what it was, or didn't know what vowel phonics were supposed to go with the words, you'd be at a loss. And so I forget what it's called, but it's like I'm going to botch this, but it's like Nikrud. That's not the right word, but if you look it up, you'll know what I mean. But it's like the little dots and etches that go along with it. And the way that they basically have kept those was by, again, the oral tradition of what they were, and then written down in other works. So, for a while it was kind of guesswork.
Right.
So that could be a thing where, at some point, if you pick up a newspaper, it's not going to have those dots and etches. And so it's just assuming that the language and can pre-assume which, vowel phonetics go with the words.
Right.
Whereas if you get, let's say, I have one here, a Hebrew to English Bible, where it has it on both sides, something like that, but then you're kind of designed that you can read or learn to read, and then you can read out of it. It has all those vowel markers. So basically someone learning to read can, if they know what the vowel markers are, know that if it's, like an aleph or an aleph kind of idea, if the B is like a ba or a va, but if you didn't have that and it just had the one symbol, you'd never figure it out. Well, you might, but it'd be very difficult. A cat could be a cut, if you had a cat on your head, you might interpret it one way, but if it's a cut on your head, it means something altogether different.
Right. So I'm trying to figure out what, maybe it's not for this first episode to figure out what exactly the issue is going to be, but it could be something like our hero could be a person who has sort of maybe not made the connection, but maybe been more of a philosopher, archaeologist, linguist, right? And people all over the world, you can get this, now that it's been translated, you can get this prophecy
that.
Everyone has it. You know, you can just pull it up on your whatever time we're saying this is, you know, whether it be, you know, I'd say like modern time. This people some people try to live up to the society, the standards of society, you know, but people are always getting kind of pushed down by other groups, maybe looking to take advantage of them or looking to, you know, stop them from sort of maybe gaining too much power, you know, and that is kind of that could be, I don't know, we can make this a multi-part series, so I'm not trying to say too, you know, not trying to make too much, but it could be sort of this, the hero is trying to create some sort of, you know, follow them, but there's like a key to it as well. You know, there's Orion's star, or, you know, like you were saying, Seth, with like the old stories, it was like the people who had this civilization possessed something that helped them sort of create the thing that they needed to, or to create the basis for the civilization, and then they could just follow these, but they needed to be able to overcome all adversaries before they could even think about trying to like create a civilization like this. You know, most places need revolution of some sort first, and then constitution. You know what I mean?
So I'm thinking the guy that was in charge of after they found the mostly completed sixth slab, and then they figured out that how it should be set up in configuration with the other slabs. They comes to the gardener and says this one big hedge is kind of gonna detract from the way we see the thing finally setting up. And the gardener's that absolutely, we'll take that out. We'll kind of reset the way the whole setting looks here. And this is a gnarled old hedge that's been there for, like they would say, time out of mind. And it's been trimmed back, and it's just gnarled and grown back in on itself. And it is just the root structure of this thing. Well, let's just say Claude, there's a lot of work involved, and he comes across a very interesting artifact. And it based on what he takes it to the guy that's in charge of the setting up the sixth slab, and he recognizes it as the amulet.
Wait, so he just finds it in the dirt?
Yeah, clutched in the roots of this gnarled old.
Well, that's a good idea, but you know, if we're gonna make this into a multi-part series, let's not like do everything right away.
Okay.
Does that sound okay to you guys? You guys want to see this thing go to a second or third?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for this first episode of what's going to be at least a 10-part series. If you liked this episode, if you liked any of our previous episodes, send me an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com, or at me on Twitter at @getsbettercast, or follow me on Twitter at @getsbettercast, or just check me out and continue to listen to the stories. If you didn't like this episode and you thought it could be better, you're probably right, but tune in next week and it probably will be. Thanks, everybody. Bye.